more on where investors might be looking to invest in the new week, I'm now being joined by Aigboje Higo, Managing Director at Capital Banco. Thank you so much, Aigboje, for taking the time out to join us. Now, let's start with what you think will be the defining factors for the market for this week. We saw some major winners last week, particularly from the petroleum marketing stocks, Forte Oil, we saw Transcorp, we saw Cornell also. But for this week, where do you see the numbers coming from?
Well, for this week, I see profit taking in some of those oil stocks and Transcorp, so the price might moderate a little bit. We're not expecting any more major results. The earnings season, it's almost gone. So I expect the market to be lackluster for most of this week, looking for direction. So I expect a very tepid market for the rest of the week.
Okay, now while we saw the likes of from the petroleum marketing stocks and some banking stocks, we saw them appreciating significantly in value. We also did see some stocks taking a hit from investors. Now, for you, what stocks at this, just off the cuff of your head, do you think will be good entry points for investors?
Well, again, some of the banks, I will still look at FBNH. I like what Stanbic is doing, UBA. I like them in the bank sector. I like the cement stocks, Dangote Cement, WAPCO. I would also, Nestle, I'll be a bit careful about that, but Nestle is doing very well. So those are some of the stocks I will look at. I will look at Fitsin. Fitsin seems to be turning in stellar performances, so I will look at Fitsin. Yeah.
What about the brewery stocks? I know we're still right in the middle or approaching the middle of November, but we're also approaching the festive season. Do you think perhaps investors can begin to look at brewery stocks, the likes of Nigerian breweries, Guinness, ahead of the December festive season?
Yes, it's a good time to start looking at them, even though I think for Nigerian breweries in particular, because of most of the acquisitions that they've just, the breweries they've acquired, it perhaps will have a drag effect on their earnings this year because consolidating and the costs associated with consolidating. So yes, Guinness hasn't been doing too well recently, but at the right price, yeah, they are good buys. If one watches the price and enter at a very good price. Okay,
we'll see how that pans out. Now let's talk about cement stocks, WAPCO, Dangote Cement. What do you think is the sentiment right now? We did see some strong Q3 numbers from Dangote Cement.
I think it's very positive. WAPCO is doing very well. Dangote Cement is doing very well. If you look at their turnover versus their profits, they have very high margins, and they look to sustain that for the rest of the year. So I think the market is very bullish on those two stocks, and it's reflected somewhat in their prices over the last couple of days.
Now, looking back since the beginning of the year up until now, what sectors do you think have been the most profitable for investors? Where do you think investors are smiling about, looking at the sectors across the market, banking, consumer, the defensive stocks, obviously not insurance stocks, but for you, where do you think investors have been most successful in terms of investing?
No, I think the banking stocks have done very well. If you look at where they were the year before and the year before that, some of the stocks in the consumer goods sector, UAC has done well, Unilever has done well, Nestle has done very well. The breweries have done well too. Insurance, in spite of the very, very difficult times, some stocks in the insurance industry have done well. Oil marketing, in recent times, Forte Oil, Cornell, they've been a revelation to the market, so they've done pretty well too. So you've had a whole realm of, sectors doing very well. Banking, cement, consumer goods, some insurance. So it's been very good. Food and beverages. So it's been a very mixed market. And that's why the market is up 35% at about now for the year, which is not bad at all.
We're talking about mixed market. What about penny stocks? How do you think penny stocks have fared so far this way? We know there have been, of course, liquidity concerns. We saw the alternative securities market being introduced by the NSE earlier this year. And there was a lot of, optimism that investors or small companies now have the opportunity, to have some visibility to investors. But we're not sure how that has played out so far. Your thoughts?
No. For me, that hasn't worked out quite well, particularly for the penny stocks. I think investors are very careful. They're looking at things like corporate governance, and they just want to watch them for a while. Interest will pick up as those companies begin to, comply fully with corporate governance requirements, get their results out there. But I think right now, most investors are sticking with stocks with good fundamentals. So even if the price comes down, you're sure you get a dividend or something out of it. So most people are, sticking with the fundamentals. If you look at the ASM stocks, for weeks on end, they hardly trade. There's hardly any trade there. So it's clear that investors are still very cautious in, embracing and engaging with such stocks.
Okay, let's talk ahead of another Monetary Policy Committee meeting that we're going to see later in the month, and of course tying that to the macroeconomic environment. How much attention do you think investors will be paying to that, looking at how perhaps new regulatory policies could affect the banks going forward, particularly their bottom lines?
No, I suspect that most people feel that there won't be any major change in policy. The feeling is that we'll just see more of the same, because I think the banks are still they're still trying to grapple with the CRR of 50%. So I don't expect there to be any more shocks in the market for the rest of the year. I think the market will just ease quietly and come to an end. So we don't expect any major upheavals in policy before the end of the year.
No, because I have heard that we might see some liquidity going, flowing more into the fixed income markets, perhaps just a few days before, on some anxiety on the part of investors. Because the last time, or the time before the MPC before the last, where we saw the central bank introducing that 50% CRR on banks' public sector deposit, nobody saw that coming. So perhaps do you think that anxiety is still somewhere hovering there in the system, and investors might begin to act based on that, just to see how things will play out?
No, clearly. I mean, once bitten, twice shy. There will be some investors who will be looking at that and being extremely careful and cautious. But I think by and large, the sentiments are that. I mean, what else can they do, really? The market is still recovering from the shock, and you don't want to shock the market, much further. So, personally, I don't expect there to be any major change in policy. But then that's my opinion.
Okay, let's come back down to today's trading. What stocks, let's talk about 5 stocks that you think could make headlines today that you think investors would be most interested in.
Well, based on what I've seen so far, GT Bank, FBNH is not really a bank, FBNH Holdings. And I think UBA, they're doing quite well today. They're doing quite well.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Aigboje, for sharing your thoughts with us, giving us your perspective on market trading for today and, of course, going forward. I've been talking to Aigboje Higo, Managing Director at Capital Transcorp.